Hey, everybody, welcome back to this episode of the Connection Project here with Sally. And I'm here today, super excited with a new friend, hopefully, Kristy Mandour. She is actually the founder of So to Speak, a coaching and content creation company on a mission. I love this to rehumanize the workforce through actionable mental wellness. I read that and I was like, wow, I wish I had that tagline. That is beautiful. She is the host of the So to Speak podcast and an ICF certified energy leadership coach, speaker, and writer. Kristy shares her decades long research on human behavior with clients and audiences where she guides high achieving emerging leaders and creative entrepreneurs in strengthening their emotional intelligence and mindset so they can communicate with purpose and presence. She lives in upstate New York, in my town, up here in upstate New York with her family and their dog, Walter. And by the way, I love that name, Walter, for a dog. So welcome, Kristy. I am so excited. I just want to give everybody a little background. I don't really know Kristy, but I have really been leaning into my intuition lately and trying to have more fun. That's what this podcast is about for me, and connection. And Kristy's actually going to be speaking at a yoga expo in our local town that I am helping out at, doing some breathwork facilitation and actually staying overnight with the guests and taking part in that for In Bloom Yoga, a local yoga studio. And so I kind of went under the radar and was looking up Kristy because I saw she was speaking there. And I was like, wow, how have I not seen her before? Because everything she really stands for, I mean, just what I read to you, I love that. So much needs to be done about mental health and wellness in the workplace. And then I saw she was doing a workshop, cultivating, I believe, I don't want to butcher it, but cultivating connection in the workplace. Maybe I butchered that a little. And so I randomly, like I do sometimes, I just messaged her. I just DM'd her and said, hey, you don't know me, but I really want to know you. And would you be interested in stepping on my new podcast? And she so graciously said, yeah. So here we are. And I'm going to get to know her more on this. And I'm super excited. So welcome, Kristy.
Oh, thank you so much, Sally. This is fantastic.
I love it. So all the things, I'm not just saying this like, oh God, I could dig in a million places, but really cultivating, rehumanizing the workforce through actionable mental wellness. I love that. I love that. Honestly, I wish I would have thought of that. Yeah, no, seriously, I'm going to be completely honest. Like that is what we are missing. And so I love that. And I love the fact that you were doing this workshop, Cultivating Connection in the Workplace, because we kind of started talking about this before we hit the record. But yeah, we need that. We're craving that. And so I usually start out asking everybody, like, what does connection mean to you, just to get us started? But it is the Wild West here on this podcast. So we are going to talk all things connection and what it means to you. And so yeah, I'm ready
Well,
for
I
it.
have to say first, I love the name of your podcast. I feel like it just is like a shining light of curiosity. I love that that
Mhm.
project is in there, which just immediately makes it more alive. That the fact that connection is in there, it gives it a sense of like constantly adjusting and adapting and being open and expansive. I'm a creative at heart, so my brain goes really fast. So when you said that, I was like, oh, it's like this experiment of like, what does connection mean to people and how can we consistently adjust it? And so when you had very graciously emailed me and told me that that was going to be one of the questions, I had time to think about what's connection. And there were two things that came. One came to me beforehand, and the other came to me just within the last few minutes of us speaking. So the first is attention. I feel like connection is attention. It's attention to something or someone, whether it's yourself, whether it's something you're working with that's tangible, whether it's an idea, whether it's another person. And so within that, there's presence, because whenever you're paying attention, you're in the moment and you're lit up. There's something there that people can feel when you are with them. And when you're checked out mentally, you might be physically there, and it might be static TV mentally. So connection is very much attention to me and presence. The other piece, though, when you were talking about it, even before we started recording, and then once you did the intro, the other piece to connection is curiosity. It's like this openness to me. It's when you're connected to someone, you're not in your head. You
Mm.
don't have preconceived judgments. You're not thinking about your next question or your rebuttal or whatever. You're fully with the person. So you're inherently curious because you're feeling this connection to the person, and then you're actually being quite trusting and vulnerable to stay with them, and then allow your curiosity to open up from there. So I would say connection is attention and curiosity
I
for
love that.
sure.
I love that. And you brought up another word that really resonates with me as presence.
That's a big one.
Yeah, because right, we can be connected. Um, we can be on the internet, right? And I kind of said this offline a little bit, and I talked about it in my first episode, but how this podcast came to be was based off my thoughts around technology and then human connection. And so many people are craving this human connection, but technology sometimes, like I probably will say almost every episode, we're out to dinner, look around, everybody's on their phone, no one's present. So I don't think technology makes you not be present, because I feel very present with you right now, and we're over Zoom, right? It's technology. That's the reason we're able to do this today. Um, but how can we live in the duality of both of those things and create presence with each other, within our community, within ourselves, be present with ourselves, our community, our workplace, so many different things. And yeah, I appreciate the comments you made about, because when I birthed this, it really is about how can this be a living, breathing movement around waking people up to what is connection to them, what is the importance of connection and presence, and how can we even raise, and this is the woo part of me, the raise the vibration, and the consciousness around connecting with each other, because we used to live in community. And back in the day where like somebody has a baby, and like then everybody comes in to help the new mom take care of the baby, and there was so much community. And now I don't know that we necessarily, there are some small communities that live like that, but we're not really doing that. And so I just think there's so many facets to this. I don't see it being one thing. I see it exploring. The more I explore with everybody, the more that I will be open to, like, what does that even mean? Even your description of connection, right? Everybody's going to have a different thought around that. And there's no right or wrong, which is what I love. It's just really bringing awareness to how we can live more attuned, more present, more connected to each other. And what would that mean for our life, for our relationships, for the workplace? There's so much there. So
There is so much there, which I feel like is something that can overwhelm a lot of people. But I love you bringing in that word, which I feel is a cousin to the word experiment. When you said exploration, that exploring in the experiment creates a sense of excitement and a sense of expansiveness and a sense of curiosity and a sense of possibility. And this inquisitiveness that we oftentimes lose as we get older, it brings it all back, that there's many possibilities. There doesn't have to be one way to create connection. And as much as we may want to have one way as we get older, because and I guess I'm speaking from experience, but also from the clients that I work with, they're in the mix right now, and they're in that middle stage of life where majority of them are parents. They're working, they're high achieving leaders or creative entrepreneurs. They're taking care of a household. Many of them have partners. They want to be involved in the community. They have friendships. Like they want to really flourish and enjoy life. And yet when it comes to certain things, they're like, just give me the answer. Like I don't
right.
have any more mental capacity to think up anything. I just want to be told what to do. But there is something that I feel is that oftentimes, like when we're thinking about cultivating a sense of connection, whether it is in the workplace or whether it is, and I'll say for just a sense of like a team, whether the team is in the workplace, whether it's in the home front, whether it's in your community, it really is about leveling the playing field and democratizing voice. because that sense of visibility that we all innately have, I truly believe, is this flipped coin, this sense of wanting to be seen. We all have that to a degree. And we are craving to be seen as much as we're terrified of being seen. It's like
Yeah,
equal parts, right? And it's
100%.
just, and so the more we can allow, this is where I do believe people are leaders in their own right. But if we're thinking of the very traditional way of looking at leadership, the people who do have more of an impact or ability to make more of an impact or have more of an influence, they have a very big responsibility, more so now than ever, because you may have said, kind of tongue in cheek or being slightly humble about being woo when you were talking about vibration. There are so many studies out there enough that vibration is so science based. It's not, I feel like it's very antiquated, and I'm teaming with you on this, Sally. I think it's antiquated for anybody to call you woo when you talk about vibration, because there are so many studies out there that people can find that connect how we are literally frequencing in our bodies to our minds. So there's so much of a connection, and then how it affects people outside of ourselves. But I just feel like the more that leaders who are in that traditional space of being at the helm of an organization or of a household or of a community do make a conscious effort to wake up, to pay attention, to raise their emotional intelligence, their self-awareness, what's happening in their mind, what are their intentions. And it might feel very overwhelming at first, like anything, but the more you practice it, it becomes very much second nature, just like brushing your teeth. I mean, when we first learned to brush our teeth, we were all probably a hot mess and we didn't do it right, but we still did it because we knew the long-term benefits. So I oftentimes connect it to that our oral care and our mental care are so connected. And when we look at the long-term benefits of committing to a practice that works for us, it's not the same for everybody. No matter how many studies are out there about how long to meditate or when to meditate, you really have to do what works for you if you're going to stay with it and make it sustainable. And to connect that to what is the long-term benefit for me to stay with it. Just like brushing our teeth. We want to brush our teeth once and then stop because that's gross.
100%.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
I totally agree with what you just said, right? And I think I just talked about this recently with somebody, maybe it was a client. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of studies out there, and I'm a meditator, and I do somatic work, and I do breath work. When I don't brush my teeth every day, it's a problem. So for me, I know that a morning practice is very helpful for me. But everybody isn't a morning person. So that doesn't mean they have to have a morning practice. And our nervous systems, although we're all in this human experience, right, in this human body, each nervous system is a little bit different, right? Okay, it's made up the same way. But what it's going to take for me to regulate my nervous system and what it's going to take you to regulate your nervous system, as we talk about that, is going to be different. And it may, someone was saying to me recently, well, I'm doing my thing, like we talked about, and I'm meditating and everything, but she had so much going on in her life that like the basic brushing of the teeth wasn't cutting it anymore because she, that's like eating 3 donuts. And I ate a bagel this morning with all these seeds, and I had to go in like 4 times and brush my teeth. And I'm just gonna like TMI, but like I was like, oh my God, where are these seeds coming from? But right, so I had to go in because I did a different action this morning that I normally do, and so the action after that. So when we're regulating, it may not be that it's going to be exactly the same, and that is perfectly okay. You have to connect back to you and what's going to feel good for you and what's going to work for you. So I, couldn't agree more with that statement. I think it's huge. Huge.
So you just said two things that I love. I love the analogy of I believe it was a sesame bagel or something that had seeds in it, whatever that was.
I don't even know
But
what seeds they
I
were.
love that analogy that like sometimes life's going to hand you a plain bagel and it's going to be easy and you can, meditate for 5 minutes and move on.
Mhm.
Other times it's going to be sesame. Other times it's going to be in everything. And you're going to need different amounts of visits to the bathroom to brush
Right.
your teeth, or you might need to, and it's, we could run with this. I'm not going to, but I love the analogy of you are going to need different styles of the same tool of oral care, right? So mental
Right.
care, depending on what you take in.
Right.
And some people leave floss in their car, some people leave it in their purse. And just to go along with that, I always say, take advantage of your car, because if you are someone who has a car, or if you're in, you're listening in and you're in more of a metropolitan area, the subway stops are a great way to just get this rhythm of like, I'm going to meditate until we get to the next subway stop.
Mhm.
Or I'll tell people, when they're at a green light, drive. And then when the light turns yellow, instead of gunning through to get to the next green light, use that as an internal indicator for you to stop. And then the red light is like a built-in timer for you just to check in. So if that's the only time you check in all day, you at least will associate being in your car and traffic lights with being more self-aware. And the extra benefit that may not even be something we're thinking of is that you're a safer driver on the road, because now you're more aware of what's happening.
Right.
So I love the analogy of the bagel. I also just feel like it's really important for people to understand that, like, they have to make it their own. Like that sense of connection, when you were talking about connecting in, we oftentimes think of connection as external, like connecting with somebody else. And so when I first like dug into this and was like, okay, I get the idea of contributing, I get the idea of connection, I get all of it was external. And what I was finding with myself, with clients, even with good friends, is that there was a tendency to, one, never be satisfied, because there was a constant like external filling,
Mhm.
and never feeling like they were doing enough. And so it got me thinking, and I was like, oh, I absolutely can feel that way. I love being productive. I love high achieving. I love getting things done. I love a list, like all those things. But if we're doing it for the sake of just doing it, we're losing the connection with ourselves. So one of the best ways to connect with someone else is to even give yourself 2 minutes to connect with yourself first.
Mhm.
And we oftentimes look past that, because to be quite honest, a lot of us don't want to know what's going on. Like we just, like, if I face
Yeah.
it, it's just stirring the pot. I don't want to deal with it. Can't I just, and I do believe there are healthy distractions for sure. At the same time, it's like a heavy weight. Like the more we just aren't facing something that's happening inside of us, there could be a tendency for it just to get heavier and bigger, and our anxiety will rev up, because whatever we are thinking, which isn't necessarily reality, is going to exacerbate whatever the situation is. So finding ways to connect with yourself regularly so that you can remind yourself, as Dr. Rick Hansen, for any of your listeners who are familiar, I'm sure you're familiar, Sally, with him. He's a psychotherapist and with a Buddhist background. And he shared in his book, Resilient, the idea of being on your own side, and how being on your own side is crucial and is really connected to a huge part of self-compassion, which is really connecting with yourself before you connect with other people. So I don't know if anybody will ever eat a bagel or go to a traffic light the same way again. I think we've completely transformed the way your audience sees both of those.
And right, and that's what it's about, right? It's really just creating these experiences and these thoughts and making people think differently, not because they're thinking the wrong way. I always try to say to my clients, like, you're not broken. Like, I wasn't broken when I had to seek out some guidance. It's really coming back to myself. I mean, I can say for myself, I lost who I was. If you asked me what I liked, I didn't even know anymore. But yeah, I could check the list off. I was productive at work. I could get it done. If somebody needed something, they came to me and I could push through it. But there comes a time when you're really not connecting inward. And that is hard for most of us, men and women. But I do see it a lot with women because we societally are expected to just I was talking to a friend this morning, same thing. It's just like the expectation is that we maybe be the caregiver or whatever it is for us. And then everybody around us thinks, well, of course we're going to do that. But sometimes it's just there's boundaries, and we need to know like what is going to feel good in our body, but we're so far removed from that. We don't even know what that is. And then we feel selfish because we're going to start to connect to ourselves. But I can tell you, right, just what you're talking about, when we start to make that transition and take that time and be present with ourselves, whether it's at the light, whether it's in the car. I could do a whole podcast on sitting in my car by myself. And, but it starts to ripple out. So when I talk to a client or a woman or a friend that says, I can't do that retreat. I don't have the money for that, or I can't hire that coach, or I can't do yoga, or whatever it is. But they will do it for their child, for their husband, they'll buy an elaborate gift. And we don't want to slow down and look and connect with ourselves. But when we do, honestly, I'm sure that you can agree with me, it's fire because it starts to ripple out, and your relationships and your connections and things at work get better, things in your house get better. I know that happened for me. I mean, I have the data on that. Like when I started to connect with myself and allowed my voice to be heard and put myself honestly first, which was new. Um, Everything changed around me. People did, maybe it was a little wonky in the beginning, but then people, because my energy changed, I elevated. And then the people around me started to be like, oh, interesting. She's not as cranky. So yeah, that interconnection is key.
It is. And a lot of times with like when you were saying that inward change, people will rise up with you. Some people you'll notice shift. I mean, some
Right.
people do drop off. I feel like it's just important when, my therapist was like, you're very skeptical, but she said it as like, as a compliment. And I took it as one because I think it's important to be skeptical, especially I take it very seriously about being in the coaching industry because it's a saturated market. And so I feel like I pride myself on being skeptical because I feel like it gives me a little bit more cred instead of just, think positively and, the right people will show up. And I do think there's truth to that. But at the same time, I feel like it's important to know that some people will leave your life. Some people will start getting shaky because anytime there is a change, we all have our own relationship to change. And if any of us are not in control of creating the change, we're going to feel very vulnerable to that change. And it's going to create a lot of stirred up feelings that might be fear, it might be overwhelm, it might be anxiety, it might be anger, like whatever it is, because we aren't the ones who created it. So I feel like, not to deter anybody, because I feel like we're just evolving humans. That's just who we are. Well, otherwise, we're going to stagnate. So it's not to deter anyone from really listening in. It's more about realizing that when you do choose to listen in, it's totally normal to first feel fear. Totally, you're not doing it wrong. If you feel fear, you're actually probably doing it in a way that is, steering away from right or wrong, but like in a way that is leading you to a deeper truth of who you are. But it also really connects you to your inner voice that's under the fear. So people can call it intuition, they can call it soul, your whatever they call it. It really, you call it whatever you want, give it a pet name, but it's just like that idea that so many people will call it like a small, like this, there's a small voice. And I always shift into this idea of it's actually not small at all. It's very strong. It's very still. And it might be a little quieter at first, but it's definitely not small. And it's very simple. It usually tells you something very simple to do. And so I feel like when you are choosing to say, you know what, I do want to start listening in, I am realizing, if I'm honest, that I'm kind of swirling here and I am overgiving and I do have a ton of resentment inside and I hate that I do. And all of that is so normal. And when you were speaking before about women tending to lean towards societal expectations of caregiving, I also feel like men, because I coach men and women, feel like men are also giving into societal expectations of either being the fixer, how many, I've so many times both ways. Like if, they're in a heterosexual relationship, like men and women, men will go, all I wanted to do was just help. And we had to have, we end up having conversation about what was it asked for? What were you sensing? They're like, oh. And then on the flip side, and this is work or partnership and relationships, like it's both. But I feel like men also are really having a lot of pressure. And where women actually have an advantage is it's much more accepted for women to get support, for them to ask for help, for them to speak and be communicative, where with men in our society, it really is not. We have not, we've been doing a much of a disservice, especially to our young boys as they rise up, that they're allowed to only have specific facials, specific identities. And I think it's creating very much of a disconnection to themselves, right? And
Yeah.
so I feel like, yeah,
No,
I
100%.
felt like you,
No, I was
yeah,
going to say 100% agree with that. I think in the mental health world, for men, right, there's this thing with women societally that we're expected to be these caregivers and this thing, but then men are expected to do this. I agree 100% with what they're, and then for mental health, um, you know, if a woman is going to go to a therapist, maybe people will be say a little something, but if a man is going to come to work and be like, I'm in therapy,
yeah,
it's like, what's wrong with him?
100%. Or you're weak, or you're a
Uh-huh.
pansy ass, or you're like all, and even if they're not saying it, they're thinking it. So
Yeah.
that whole idea, and I'll tell you this, I ran, so cultivating connection is pretty much the overarching theme in the workshops that I run within businesses. But the main title of the workshop is called Get Ahead of Your Head, because it really is about, if you want to be part of a team, you have to really get clear on what are you allowing into your mind, because that's the projector of how you're going to see things. So if you're not choosing your thoughts, which you're not going to choose every single thought. We have over 60,000, up to 60,000 thoughts a day. I mean, that's insane. The more though you can practice and paying attention to it, the more you'll be able to notice what's happening in your world. So I did one of those workshops for the Department of Transportation, our local regional chapter. And it was not surprising. It was their leaders, and it was 75%, if not more, male. And they were with me, like with me. And I could feel it. And I had to really check in with myself to stay grounded so I didn't burst into tears out of joy, and also out of like my heart just being like, oh my gosh, we need this. We need to, yes, to women, and we need to give this opportunity as a norm to men, to be able to share how they're feeling without someone breaking chops about it being touchy feely, when it's not. It's just, how can we move through that? So one of the guys, when we were on break, probably the most stereotypical masculine of them all, he like towered over me, and he came up and he was very with me the whole time. And I could feel that he was a very introspective and grounded guy. And he said, this is really something what you're bringing to us right now. He said, because I heard somewhere along the way that men suffer in isolation. And we just let it kind of hang in the air. And I said, yeah, I've heard that too. And he's like, yeah. And then he, walked away and got a coffee or something. And my intuition was not, I don't feel like he was talking about himself. I feel like he was kind of looking at it as almost appreciating who was in the room a bit more. And that's connection, right? It's
Right.
connecting to yourself, giving yourself the respect to stay with the person who's talking, even if it's something that's getting really uncomfortable inside. And instead of going to your head out of safety or control, you stay with them. You don't have to respond. You don't have to say, you do whatever you want to do, but staying with them is then going to create such a stronger connection with the other person. That was a very long-winded something. I don't know where it came from, but I get very worked up about what we're also offering. I think women empowerment is wonderful. I feel like absolutely everybody should be paid the exact same amount. We don't even need to go that route, but like I do. And I also feel like it's not an us them thing. I feel like it needs to be a we thing. And I don't know if that will ever change in my lifetime, but I sure as hell, like that's a huge mission that I have of working in the workplace, is for us to each step up to the table and understand what we're bringing and see through the differences so that we can really make our world a better place. I mean, we need to be making our world a better place.
Right. It's a human thing.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a male, female thing. It's a human thing. Like, right. Everybody deserves to have their place at the table. Everybody deserves to be heard. Nobody deserves to be in isolation about their emotions. I mean, many of us were brought up to not even feel their emotions. I mean, I can say that I didn't even know like what safety was in my body or
Mm-hmm.
emotions or how I was
Mm-hmm.
feeling anymore because I had really just pushed through that for so many years. Um, it's almost embarrassing to say as a healthcare worker, but I think, we just see that a lot, males and females. And, it's interesting you say that because as a breathwork facilitator, I've been facilitating breath in the community through a lot of the yoga studios. But I have had this thing in my mind about reaching out to the gyms and stuff because men are underserved, right? And so
Oh, yes. I
in
love
other
that.
communities, we're bringing men in to breath work, which is a really healing modality. And like, I've been trying to figure out how I can bring that in to our own community. Um, and serve them because there is
Mm-hmm.
so much. I mean, I have it in my family, right? There's mental health is everywhere. Addiction is everywhere. There's so many things that men end up in this place even
Mm-hmm.
when they're in this place of leadership, but they don't have an outlet to allow their emotions or what's been stored in their own body to come out. So they can be more creative. They can be more
Yes.
giving in the workplace, in their family. Like we have to have that ability to allow that. So I've been cultivating that piece in my mind in 2024, how I'm going to bring breath work to men.
It's
Um,
it's wonderful. And here's the thing with the breath work, because I've never experienced it with you facilitating. I have experienced it with other facilitators. And what I love about breath work, what you do and the entire field, is that it creates a sense of release without having to talk. And a lot of guys that I've experienced, although I have to say, when I've done one-on-one coaching, the guys are the ones who the minute it starts, it's like talk, talk, talk. Like they have so much to get out, which I love. But I'm like, oh my gosh, this is showing where you're so not seen, or where there's also times where we over talk out of fear of like really checking in. So that's that happening. But I love that it gives them an opportunity not to have to fix, not to have to speak, not to have to come up with an answer. And it'll be very interesting. I think the whole idea of going into gyms is wonderful. It's so needed. You already have people who are there with realizing, even if they don't get it, really, that it's a mind body connection, that it just connects. And one of the things too, Sally, that I love when it comes to waking us up, whether it be, well, no matter who the person is, if it's someone who's like possibly a little interested but a little skeptical, I love working with that person, that audience, because when you can connect our emotions to information and take away all of the judgment and all of the ways that we have labeled what's good and what's bad and bucketed emotions, but we just say emotions are really just information. They're just telling you, and we just neutralize it. People start perking. Like I can see a lean in, I can see ears perked, like, tell me more. What do you mean? And it's like, yeah, it's just like we're making way too much of a big thing about emotions.
right.
And this is coming from someone I'm highly emotional, like I can be highly, highly emotional. And at the same time, that was one thing that truly helped me go, oh, I got out of my spiral. I call it like the mental quicksand. Oh, I just caught it when I noticed, oh, I am feeling, like simply saying I am feeling versus saying I am angry. Like when you say I
Right.
am, this has been around forever, whether people are familiar with Dr. Dan Siegel's work or Rick Hansen probably talks about it too. When we say I am fill in the blank, it's like our entire being is that emotion. So of course we're going to feel like we are that emotion. We aren't going to be able to discern between ourselves and the feeling. When you let like a teeny word shift and you instead say I am feeling or I am noticing anger, it gives you just enough of a space for you to start getting curious instead of judgmental and going, I am noticing anger where? Oh my gosh, my jaw is feeling really tight, or my neck is feeling tight, or my hands are feeling really tight. And you take your attention away from your mind, which is spinning, and you just put it on your body, and it immediately regulates your system.
Yeah.
So just sharing these, I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead.
no, no, no. Finish, finish, finish.
I was just going to say, sharing these little tweaks that are connected to science, people get it and they start understanding it, and it's actionable. That's why, like, so to speak started as a presentation coaching company, and I still love doing that because I have a background in performing arts, and I've always written my entire life about stories, whether fiction or nonfiction, and I still feel like that is the core of all of the work I do, whether it's speaking to audiences or writing or coaching one-on-one or in groups. It really is allowing people to feel seen, to share their story, to listen to other people's stories so that they feel connected, but also for them to be able to act on behalf of themselves so that they have agency in creating their story. So that's why, with the shift from presentation coaching to like team building to energy leadership, it's like actionable mental wellness. And I say wellness, it was very, very conscious of like changing the tagline to actionable mental wellness, because I wanted it to be actionable, because when we just stay in our mind, it does nothing. So it needs to be something like, oh, I got that insight. Oh, I can say I am feeling angry. And then what do I do? So I wanted there to be, then what do I do? And the mental wellness piece is because mental health has a very clinical feel immediately to it. And although there is a bit of pushback right now about wellness and what wellness is doing and how it's creating this like consumerism that's going against the point of wellness. And I'm not advocating that whatsoever. I'm saying when I think of wellness, like mental wellness, there's something that I feel I have more agency over, me doing something for myself, and then on behalf of my kids, and then on behalf of my friends and community, and versus mental health, you know, I feel like it just has a different, mental health oftentimes feels like you need to go to someone else for it. Whereas mental wellness, there's a sense of like you can bring it within yourself and make it happen.
Mm,
So that was a big deal.
I like that. I like that. I think that there is a little bit of consumerism with the wellness industry, obviously. Um, but we also, I think, something you hit on, and there is a piece to our radical responsibility in that teaching our clients or teaching our friends or our family members, teaching myself that I needed to take radical responsibility for myself, right? I could keep complaining about my job and this and that and my partner, but until I took responsibility for myself, and yes, I needed some guides to help me along the way, but
Yes.
not to be with me forever, right? It was really about creating this environment within me that I know that I can have choice and have sovereignty over how the rest of my life is going to go and how I am going to show up in the world and how I am going to connect. And I think a lot of people, I don't know that, don't understand it. We haven't really been taught it, I guess, I would say. And I think I like the discernment between mental wellness and mental health. And there's
And
still a
that's a judgment.
stigma. And there's still a stigma
Yeah.
around mental health, right?
Yes. Yes.
Going to
And
therapy. I mean, I am in therapy and I like, scream it from the rooftops now. But when I started therapy, um, we didn't want to have a lot of conversation around it, that we were going to go to therapy. But
Yeah. Well, listen,
now
it's accepted. Yeah.
I tell everybody, I'm like, everybody
Mm.
should have a therapist, a coach. They should have some kind of guide to help them along the way, not to keep them down, but more to be able. I mean, there was many, many years of not being able to emote. It's not going to there's not going to, I'm not going to flip a switch in my life in 3 months. It's just not going to happen. My stuff is
Right.
pretty deep.
Well, yeah, and everybody knows there are like the timeline is so specific, just like we were talking before about meditation practice, whether you meditate or not, whether some people garden and that's meditating, or they
Right.
walk and that's meditating. So it's so different. And like, and how long it takes is so subjective and it's so personal. And some years it might be 3 months, and some years you might be like, oh my gosh, months might feel like 10 years. And you might say, I need to do this longer or shorter. And then sometimes you step away from all of it and you're like, I just need to fully integrate this. And then one day you're like making eggs and you go, oh my gosh, I just got it. So it's all about reconnecting with yourself consistently so that you listen in before you take from the outside. And one thing that when you were speaking that made me also think about when you were talking about back before, when you were talking about women and caregiving, and we were talking about the stereotypical roles of gender from decades and decades ago. One thing that does tend to help, and you had mentioned something about like that you were almost embarrassed that you weren't as aware of your emotions, or you weren't as, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but something along those lines. And I feel like that is so normal. And one way that people really buy into advocating for themselves and investing in themselves, and whether it be therapy or coaching or whatever, is we really pull back and say, like, if you have kids or if you're working with a future generation in any way, you're modeling for them. How do you want them to show up? Like, these are our future leaders.
Yeah.
How do you want them to show up? And you're literally changing the trajectory of your family lineage. You're generationally changing the trajectory of your family, because there is so much compassion that's given to people's parents and their grandparents and their great grandparents when they look back and they say, I'm so embarrassed that I was not more aware of my emotions, or I'm embarrassed that I was embarrassed for having emotions. Now I look at it like this is so normal. And I feel like I'm starting too late, or I feel like I wish I knew this in my 20s, or I feel like blah, 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 blah. And I'll pause and I'll go, do you understand that you are literally getting a baton from your previous generations, from your ancestors who got you this far, so that you could wake up at this exact moment in time, whether you're 65 or 35 or 85, so that you then can take the baton and hand it off to the next generation. We're all on the same team.
Yes. Yes. 120%. I actually had a moment in time that I'll share. And because I was a young mom and I can't go back in time, right? I can't go back in time and change anything around my mothering, but I have three granddaughters under the age of 8. And so there was a time in my healing journey and when I was really becoming aware of my emotions and my lack of emoting and all the things. And I said to myself, I literally had this conversation with myself. I can't change anything from the past. But what I can do is I can be responsible for how I show up for these three little girls when they are in my presence. And so, and my daughter-in-law, it's a very different way of raising the kids, but they are so more in check with their emotions. And we don't, it's just a different way that we are with them. And they're so much more able to speak about their feelings or what they want or what they don't like. And if they want to be hugged or they don't want to be hugged, or if they want to be picked up. And so it's so different. And there's nothing in the back and from my lineage that can change, but I can be different. And I had an aha moment around that, about if that's the only thing I can do differently, then it was really important to me to show up differently because I was learning and exploring myself. And so for the listeners out there, it's so important. And it's not about shame or guilt. It's really about I wasn't aware. Like that's not how I was raised. And I'm much more aware now in my own journey. And that's where I take my clients. And that's where I want my granddaughters as they're becoming women in this new world, on how they can be authentic to themselves and feel their emotions. Um, One day, my granddaughter was like, I'm like, what's the matter? And she's like, I'm just upset right now. Like literally, that's what she said. She was probably 6 at the time. She said, I'm upset. I'm going in the bedroom. She went in the bedroom. She's meditating. Like she's like in this meditative state. And she said, I just need a minute. And then she came out. She was fine. She's like, I just needed a minute, Grandma. Like that wasn't even in my
It's
like
amazing.
seriously, but we're exposing them to different things. I'm exposed to different things, and it isn't because I'm amazing. It's really just like just really that experience. And so she knows she needed a timeout. Like she needed to time herself out. Like she was like, it's too much right now with her sisters, and she did this. And so there's so many examples of that, and I just think, oh my God. Like, I don't know. I think I was upset with something one day, and the little one said to me, Grandma, you just need to breathe. And I like almost like literally peed myself. I was like, oh my God. And yeah, I mean, they are sponges. So they're learning, like, okay, I just need to take a deep breath. Like, yeah, it's just can be magical. And so yeah, just what we can't go back. And we have a lot of lineage and like allowing that shame to be released. But I did have that shame because I was a healthcare worker for many, many years. And I'm like,
Mhm.
how did I get to this point? But then I quickly had to realize, or sometimes in some respects, slowly had to realize, like, I can't go backwards. I can just go forward, honestly. And where am I right here today? And where am I today? And I don't know, even know where I'll be tomorrow, but today, having more presence and connection can be so important to my growth and teaching the kids that today. And I think there is a lot more happening with that in the world, and the work that you're doing in the workplace and with men is so, so needed.
It is. And what a gift for you and for your family and for whoever comes in contact with you, but just staying a little bit more insular, like that you were so clear on being able to just say, I may not be able to change this.
Hmm.
I can change this.
Yeah,
And if that's the one go to that you go to for the rest of your life, right? Let me just check in. What can I change and what can I change? It's the whole control thing, right? What can I control and what can I control? And when you can get clear on that, what a gift for your granddaughters to witness their grandmother in her amazingness. Because I will say, like, you kind of held yourself back. I will say, yes, that you are amazing. And there is something amazing about catching your mind when you've had decades long spiraling going one way
mhm.
and you're catching it and going, no, 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 no. I'm going to choose this instead. That is, I would say, the definition of amazing because our minds have this world of their own if we let them. So when we do make a conscious effort of just kindly returning, like literally turning ourselves back to more of who we truly are, that is an amazing feat. And the more people that are interested, that are willing to be interested, that are willing to be a little bit more open minded, that are willing to go in, even with arms crossed, like convince me, okay, you're still at least willing, you're still at least interested. And that is exactly what we need. We need more curious humans and
Mm.
less judgmental humans. And so much of it starts with almost all of it, I would say, starts with internally being curious versus judgmental. We've
Yeah,
all got the judgment, the self judgment down. Like we don't need to talk. I mean, that becomes its own, like, oh, you think you're hard on yourself, Sally. You should see how hard I am on myself. It becomes this bizarre competition. Like, I am so hard on myself because God forbid I'm not. I'm going to look so self absorbed. Like, no, we need to
I
stop
know.
that because
I know.
it's ruining us. It's totally ruining us.
Curious is a word that I never used to use. And curious is a word I use all the time now. Use it all the time with everybody because I think it really is an amazing magical word, right? Instead of using the judgment, which agree we do, right? I call mine Judy. She's like comes out and she's so judgy and and I like that I have to name my people, my protectors. I name them because I just want to be able
Totally.
to talk to them and be like, okay, no, we're not doing that today, Judy. Like we're not going there. But curiosity is amazing. I mean, we need to use that more. You used that word a couple times today in the podcast, and it really is so helpful. When you start to just get curious and you don't put any
Mhm.
story around it, you don't make any judgment around it, you just are like, interesting.
A
What do you
hundred percent.
say?
I love that you just talked about naming your protectors or naming your people, because that's something that I dive into with clients all the time. And that is where I always say like science and art intersect, because that's where you take the emotional intelligence, all the studies that show talking to yourself in the third person or regulating yourself or being a witness to your mind. Well, then what do? You bring in some play and you actually name the person, you name the character, you name it so that you know who you're talking to. So you have more compassion for that part of yourself versus reaming it out or feeling that's all of who you are. And so that's something that I feel is really, really important for people to know. Do I have time to share one little story that I
Yeah.
think your
Yeah.
listeners
Yeah.
will
We're a
think?
little bit over, but yeah, share away.
We went off, hit the ground running. So when my daughter was 4 years old, she ran into the kitchen. I was at the stove. She ran to the kitchen and she had a Disney book in her hand, and she was like, "Mommy, look, it's you." And I was, stirring the pot. I just had my son, and so I was trying to stay calm. I was in a very frazzled state at that point, and I thought, she's going to show me Jasmine or she's going to show me Pocahontas. And I'm going to just kind of, oh, that's so cute. And I'm going to go back to stirring. And she flipped the book around and it was a picture of Maleficent with like the horns and pointing. And I almost totally broke down in front of her. I was like, I am the worst mother in the entire world. She looks at me like I'm Maleficent with horns and pointing and the gown and the thing. And I was like, and I texted one of my good friends and I was like, I'm horrible. I'm the worst mother. I can't believe this. And my friend wrote me back within seconds and said, I don't know about her, but what I see is a powerful woman with a fierce sense of style. And I was like, how lucky am I to, first of all, have this friend in my life? And second of all, have enough of a space to think, that's an interesting perspective,
Right.
instead of just, she's wrong, I'm an awful mom. And there are two things just to wrap this up. The first is I have a Maleficent inside of me. I know that. So when you talk about your Judge Judy, the more I can embrace Maleficent and realize, like, oh, honey, I get you. And I realize that there are two sides of Maleficent. There's a side that comes out when I'm terrified, and there's a side that's fierce and really supports and protects me. It's super helpful. The second piece is that when my daughter was 4 years old, what I forgot was when she ran up to me, she was so excited. Her energy was excited. It wasn't terrified. It wasn't scared. It wasn't like, Mommy, I found this picture. She was so excited. So oftentimes when we can pay attention, not just internally, but what's happening, one of the best ways I heard that was pay attention to the music under the lyrics. When someone's talking to you, what's the sense that they're giving you? Oftentimes we get a better full picture and we don't get as lost in our mind with the story.
I love that. I love that. And that's a great way to end. Well, I think we could talk forever. There's so much to say. And
Agreed.
I want you to share. I just want to thank you before you share for taking a chance and stepping in and having this conversation about connection. And I know we touched a little bit on cultivating connection in the workplace, but you're doing sounds like such amazing work. I really want to hear more. And I love everything about this topic. And I think the work you're doing with men is beautiful. And so tell our listeners what you're offering these days and where they can find you. And just everybody know we're going to be sharing all of Kristy's information when this episode comes out. So it'll all be there. You'll be able to get in touch with her. But yeah, whatever you want to share, this is your chance.
Well, for sake of time, since we are running a little over, I will direct everybody to the podcast because the podcast has all the offers. It has, if you want to be part of the email community, if so to speak, that where I share stuff about the podcast and resources. The whole focus of the podcast, which is so to speak podcast with Kristy Mandour, is really to bring on leaders and creatives and entrepreneurs, and I could do solo episodes, just how to get out of our head so that we can get back to doing meaningful, impactful work. That's like the ultimate theme of the entire show. So I would say definitely check out the podcast, and especially because it's free content and it's really good content. I really pride myself on creating what I want to consume. So
Beautiful.
that's where I would say go. Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for this week's episode. And Kristy, thank you so much for stopping in with us today.
That
Thank
was
you. All
wonderful. Thank you
right,
so much too.
bye everybody.